The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has said that the government is ready to step in to protect the economy from the impact of US tariffs as world leaders continue to respond to a new global economic order driven by Donald Trump's protectionism. Here in the UK, the increase in employers' national insurance took effect today, and businesses are worrying about their future. Our senior political correspondent, Paul McNamara, reports.
The economic relief means the swinging of men's minds from fear to confidence.
Confidence is the plea from a US president in the midst of the last global trade war, say economists. Herbert Hoover in the 30s could be followed by President Trump almost a century later as warnings of recession rise. And Keir Starmer now warning the global economy could be changed forever. Writing in today's Telegraph, the Prime Minister said, "The world as we knew it has gone. We stand ready to use industrial policy to help shelter British business from the storm." Some people may feel uncomfortable about this. The idea the state should intervene directly to shape the market has often been derided. But we simply cannot cling on to old sentiments when the world is turning this fast.
What sort of state intervention then can we expect?
What the Prime Minister's been saying, which I think is pretty obvious to everyone, is that the world is changing, not just on security and defence, but now on trade, in a way that creates a lot of volatility. And so it's right that as a government, we work alongside business here in the UK to make sure that we have a stronger and more resilient economy.
Donald Trump may well see any form of state intervention to help UK firms that doesn't help US firms as a form of retaliation. Aren't you at risk of escalating this trade war?
Look, we're not going to shy away from the idea that as a government in the United Kingdom we should support the UK economy and UK businesses.
More than 50 countries have contacted President Trump to negotiate deals since introducing sweeping tariffs, his team say. UK industry isn't just dealing with hefty 10% duties though, but a rise today in employer national insurance contributions. This industrial recruitment firm from Liverpool said the costs will be big. The question, will they be passed on to customers?
Absolutely, yeah. The cost to us as a company is £1,000 per head, and we're a small company. You look at tiny companies with 1 or 2 people, they're not going to recruit additional people because of the cost. But the bigger companies, again, 50, 60, medium-sized companies, it's not going to help them. And the larger companies are just, I wouldn't even like to imagine how much more money they're going to have to pay. And those costs are then obviously going to be transferred onto the consumers in the long run, and we're going to end up paying more for everything.
In Keir Starmer's Telegraph article, he says these new times demand a new mentality. Are you willing to apply this new mentality to your rise in national insurance contributions?
Well, the rise in employer national insurance contributions for bigger businesses was an important part of the budget to get a grip of the public finances that we'd inherited from the Conservatives, to protect our promise to working people not to increase taxes in their payslips.
Okay, so you're not going to rethink it, even though the times have changed, the world has changed, you're not changing your policy?
No.
No change means no let-up at this family-run nursery. Clobbered, they say, by both government guarantees of 30 hours of free childcare for eligible parents in England and rising national insurance.
So it's been very difficult for nurseries. Unfortunately, it's meant that we have had to put our fees up, which we hate doing. I'm very aware of how that impacts families.
Higher fees for parents, lower pay for the owners.
We've had to take our own pay cuts from myself, my gran and my mum's wages to be able to pay for things like crayons or even like paper, because everything's going up. It's not just the wages, it's not just insurance, it's actually everything.
Everything going up here, she says. The fear everywhere else this week, markets coming crashing down.
Paul McNamara reporting. And Paul has been speaking to the Conservative Party leader, Badenoch, about the economy.
Global trade, as we know it, seems to have changed forever. Keir Starmer is working to try and get a trade deal with the US. But what would your strategy be for responding to Donald Trump's tariffs?
Well, I'm a former trade secretary, so we've had this situation before in other areas, more minor. The first thing is not to have retaliatory tariffs, because that's going to make it more expensive for people in this country. One of the things we need to remember is that when there's a tariff, it is the buyer who pays. And I don't want people to be spending more money at a time when the economy is doing badly because of the decisions that Labour has made.
But do you think you'd be any better at getting a trade deal with Donald Trump?
Well, we did. We were negotiating in 2020. President Biden stopped the trade deal.
But you had 4 years when President Trump was president the first time round, and you didn't get a trade deal in that 4 years. Why would you be any better now?
Because we had to wait until we'd left the European Union.
What would you be willing to give up? Would you be willing to carve out a tax giveaway for the tax bros on the digital services tax?
In trade negotiations, you think about everything.
So yes.
You think about everything. What I'm not going to do is pick up little bits of policy here and there. You look at it all in the round. It depends.
And that
on
might be quite a major one for the US, for Elon Musk.
But you don't just talk about those things in isolation.
Okay, you said categorically that if Prime Minister, you would reverse Labour's VAT on private schools. Today, Labour is rising employers' national insurance contribution. Would you be willing to scrap that if you were Prime Minister? You've called it a jobs tax.
It is a jobs tax. It is a jobs tax. Businesses are closing. People are getting paid less. What Labour needs to do is start thinking about what it can do to grow the economy and lift the burden on business.
So you won't commit to scrapping it?
I think that national insurance rise was the wrong decision. We would not have taken it. But what we're going to do could be something radically and totally different.
There are a number of issues for which you don't want to give a running commentary. You've been leader for 5 months now. Is there a risk that people are looking at you saying, we don't really know where she stands economically, and that's the reason why you're hemorrhaging support and even councillors to the Reform Party?
No, I don't think so, actually. Look, it's just 2 weeks ago, I talked about how net zero by 2050 is an impossibility. Just today, Keir Starmer has said that he's going to change the zero electric vehicles mandate again. Doing what we did 2 years ago, I lobbied as business secretary because I could see what it was doing to our car industry. He called me a climate change denier. They scrapped our plan. Now they're going to change it again. This is not a government that is thinking properly about the future. They don't have a plan.
So why is it, do you think, that you're so unpopular and hemorrhaging support and councillors to the Reform Party?
Because we've been in government for 14 years. We had our lowest ever share of the vote. We've just been kicked out of government. People aren't just going to come rushing back. It takes time to rebuild trust with the public, and that's what I'm doing. These election results that are coming in May are going to be some of the most difficult we've ever had, but that is what politics is like. It takes time to rebuild trust.
You're not rebuilding trust, it's going in the opposite direction. Support is going to reform.
I disagree with that. We could see what
the polls disagree with you.
Well, I disagree. I can see what people are saying on the ground, and at the end of the day, if people are angry with the government, they will vote for protest parties. The reason why protest parties like Reform and the Lib Dems and the Green Party are doing well is because the two major parties are losing support. I'm the new leader of the Conservative Party. We're working to rebuild trust.
Kemi Bagnott, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, a short while ago, I spoke to the American pollster Frank Luntz and Sir Crawford Falconer, who was the UK's chief trade negotiator up until the end of last year. I began by asking Sir Crawford how exactly the Prime Minister could shelter British industry from the storm.
I think it would be ill-advised to do anything like raise your own tariffs, as it were, either by retaliation or by sort of running to sort of try and have a knee-jerk protectionist reaction. I've seen no indication that that's what in mind. I think you do need to provide stability. You need to help and support industry, to help them export and to do the rest on that front. And, you know, at the end of the day, the thing that's most important is stimulating growth in the UK economy. The government's already committed to doing that.
Frank Luntz, you heard Sir Crawford there talking about stability. Do you think if there's a negative reaction on the markets, is that going to be enough to force Donald Trump to back down? Or is it really only going to be when Americans start complaining about price rises or worrying about a looming recession?
It's a good question because in the first administration, Donald Trump repeatedly used the stock market to demonstrate the success of his policies. And we've seen a complete cave in the market over the last 72 hours. So that does have an impact. But I'll tell you this. Number one, the public is turning against tariffs because they see it as a tax increase. Number two, the public does not like, as your guest said, instability. They want predictability. And number three, they want a scalpel, not a sledgehammer brought to economic issues, governmental issues. So even if the public believes that it's not a level playing field for the American worker and the American products and services, they still don't want this war that hurts the consumer in the end.
So, Crawford, Keir Starmer's got to navigate a way through this war in the best interests of the British consumer. Has Keir Starmer now got to do whatever it takes to get a deal over the line? Or should it not be a deal at any price?
Well, both of those things is quite simply how you approach it. You have every reason to still try and have a deal. You know, we got stiffed first time around, clearly, so did everyone. We didn't end up as badly off as others. The trick now is that we need to try and get a better deal. Now, it may be difficult, and it may be very difficult in the short term to have that as an effective outcome, but you've got to try. So I think that still has to happen.
I mean, there's 50 countries, apparently, that have got in touch with the White House looking for negotiations. Interesting, not many are vowing retaliation. Do you expect these tariffs to sort of disappear in a puff of smoke as deals are negotiated?
The goal in all of this is to lower the cost for consumers. The second goal is to increase American manufacturing. And the third goal is to give Americans a level playing field. If those things are achieved, the tariffs aren't necessary. In the end, I know people think Americans don't have tolerance for higher prices, and I will confirm that based on the polling that we have done.
Right. Well, as that precipice looms, Sir Crawford, you know, as you describe it, that the UK's got to try and get this deal with the US over the line. How does it approach other trading allies? For example, should it align more with the EU, or should it try and strike deals with Canada, India, Australia, or can it do all those things at one time?
Well, I think it's capable of doing a number of them. And there's no reason why the current approach of negotiating with other countries shouldn't continue for liberalisation. And, you know, there are some things, obviously, which the government can do to tidy up its relationship with the EU. I don't see any problem with that.
And the EU is its biggest trading partner, after all.
You know, but the government said it's not going to join the customs union, it's not going to join the single market. So short of that...
So there's a ceiling on that?
Short of that, there are limited things you could do. They're not going to shift the dial massively. So yes, you negotiate, if you can, liberalisation for the largest economies you can possibly think of. I think the confusion that is out there, what is required is a clarity about what the risks are. And I think part of it is we've just got to be cool and clear about it and not to run off in different directions. We've got to try and ride this out, try and negotiate it, and try not to make it worse. That seems to me to be a risk that hasn't really been weighed, and it's always hard to avoid it.
Frank, just finally, sum up for us the sort of scale of disruption and damage potentially to the American consumer in particular.
In a sentence, there is more damage to the stock market and to the economy than there was in the opening days of COVID. That's how significant this is. One more day of crazy gyrations in the markets, and you're going to see people start to seize up in investments, seize up in savings. And I'm quite concerned that it will have a knock-on effect in the weeks to follow.
Frank Luntz, Sir Crawford Faulkner, thank you both very much.